Good morning to everybody joining us. We'll give it just a few more minutes and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, well, good morning. We still have people dialing in. So hello to all of our attendees. My name is Satara. I'm the Senior Director of Growth here at Bambi, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you guys join us today. This is going to be a great session, so we'll dive right in. But just before we do that, a couple quick housekeeping notes. All attendees are muted to ensure minimum background noise. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see an icon labeled QA. Please input any questions there you have along the way into the chat box, and we'll answer them as we go in the QA section. For any questions that we don't get to, we'll have a Bambi team member reach out to make sure we get your questions answered. At the bottom, you're also going to see an icon that's labeled chat. So if you're experiencing any technical issues, please let us know and we'll do our best to quickly assist you, get you back up and running. At any time during the webinar, if you would like to speak to a Bambi consultant, please just type into that same chat box, contact me, and shortly after the webinar concludes, we'll make sure to reach out to you. And for many of you asking, within 48 hours, you'll receive an email link with a survey and a recording of the webinar. So please make sure you give us feedback on today's session so we can continue improving the experience. And with that said, I would love to introduce our speaker, Dominic. He is our learning and development consultant at Bambi with over 10 years of experience doing this and lending his brilliant mind to small business owners all over and how they can strategically grow not only their business, but create amazing employee experiences. So there really is no better expert than him. Dominic, I'm going to roll it over to you. So take us from here.
Thank you so much, Seth. Hi, everyone. So glad that you're able to join us this morning. As Seth mentioned, I have been working with small businesses to develop onboarding programs and learning and development strategies for the past 10 years. I've worked in essentially every major industry: food and beverage, hospitality, healthcare, entertainment, you name it. And one thing that's always stood out to me is that most small businesses don't have a robust onboarding or training strategy, which is why I've built a career in this space, right? I love helping small businesses. So today I want to share some of my favorite tips and tricks that you can use to maximize the potential of your small business. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be talking about a few different topics. I'll start by focusing on some of the components of onboarding. We'll take a look at effective employee training. And lastly, it's important to measure the success of your programming. So I'll be showing you how to start measuring the success of your onboarding and training programs. So before I get started, I do want to get to know all of you a little bit better. I've got a quick question for you. I'm going to drop a poll into the Zoom. So how would you rate your knowledge of employee onboarding and training? So this go ahead and get this started. Go ahead and leave a response there. We've got 3 different options: beginner, advanced, expert. I just want to get a sense for your level of comfort with these topics so that I can make sure that I gear the information towards your needs. So I'm seeing a lot of people jumping into the chat here. About 70% of you are beginners, so welcome. I'm so glad to have you here today. I see some advanced and expert level L&D and onboarding strategists. So I'm going to be sharing, some a little bit more nuance for all of you. Thank you very much. Just dropping those results in there for you. Again, we do have some overrepresentation of beginners, which is great. This is going to be an awesome introductory course for all of you. So let me go ahead and jump into the presentation. Now, the first thing that I want to start talking about is the components of employee onboarding. So what is employee onboarding? Employee onboarding refers to a process in which new employees are integrated into the business. It's how you welcome your new staff, right? And now that welcoming piece is really paired with a lot of valuable information. And this is where you're going to want to welcome new employees and help them understand the organization, the structure of the business, your culture, mission, vision, really get them to be a part of your company, right? And it's also a really great opportunity for you to help new employees understand where they fit into the business and how their role and their contributions contribute to the success of your company. Now, why is employee onboarding important? There's really two main benefits of employee onboarding, and that's going to be employee retention and increased productivity. So when you onboard employees properly and effectively, you're more likely to retain them for an extended period of time. And you're more also likely to increase productivity, which is super, super valuable. So the key takeaway here is that effective employee onboarding is going to lead to highly productive employees who choose to stay with the business for extended periods of time. This is so valuable for small business owners, especially when you consider the cost of having to attract, recruit, train, and develop replacement employees. If you can onboard people and set them up for success at the very start of employment, you can keep them around and keep them productive for long periods of time, which will definitely save your business quite a bit of money in the long run. So now that we have a baseline understanding of what onboarding is, I have another question for you in the chat. A little curious, does your company have a structured onboarding process for new hires? So another poll for you here. Going to launch this right now. Simple yes or no, just to understand what you're currently doing in your business and how you provide onboarding to new hires. And I'm actually seeing quite a bit of a split, which is great. So today, for those of you who don't have an onboarding process in place, I'm going to teach you how to set one up. And for those of you who already have an onboarding process, so much of what we talk about today is going to be a great opportunity for you to assess the effectiveness of your programming and perhaps find something that can introduce more value for your team. All right, so I'm going to end this poll here. I'll share the results. We do, of course, see a 46-54 split. Great. Thank you all so much for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and continue with our presentation here. Let's see here. On the next slide, we're going to look at those key components of employee onboarding. So really, when you're looking at employee onboarding, there's three major components of the onboarding process. We've got pre-onboarding, orientation, and then the onboarding as a whole. So we're going to be breaking all three of those down, and let's take a look. So in terms of pre-onboarding, this is how you prepare for incoming new hires. At this point, we're going to assume that you've already recruited and interviewed the candidate. You've already extended an offer of employment, but they haven't quite yet started on their first day. So this is how you prepare for that employee coming to the office for the first time or your place of business. So I always recommend sending a welcome email. This is a great thing to do for new employees. It's a easy way to welcome them, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to share some valuable information. For example, this is where you can tell new employees where to park. If they need to have some type of parking pass, you can let them know where to acquire it. Make sure that you include in the welcome email things that they may need to bring to their first day. So that should all be sent to them before that they arrive so that they really feel comfortable and are familiar with what to do when they arrive on their first day. The next one is to set up the employee workstation, right? So you want to make sure that you have everything ready to go. If they're at a desk, make sure the desk is nice and clean and ready for them to arrive. If you're providing any type of technology, maybe a laptop, I do recommend that you have the laptop set up, ready to go, so you don't have to deal with all of that on the first day. It sets a great first impression. If you're in more of a service industry, make sure you have those employee uniforms all ready to go. So that's just a really nice way to prepare for the new hire. In terms of the pre-onboarding, I always recommend selecting a new hire buddy. And this is someone that should have close proximity to the new hire's role, so that if they ever have any questions, that they have someone that they can turn to. The new hire buddy is also a perfect person to greet that new hire when they arrive on site. Make sure that you coordinate with whoever the new hire buddy is going to be so that they know to expect the new employee. If you have any special requests that they need to be aware of, make sure that you share those in advance. And this is really going to set everything up for a great first day. The last thing I would recommend in terms of pre-onboarding is to prepare all of the new hire documentation. So if you have, a training manual, make sure it's printed, ready to go. If you have HR policies, again, make sure they're printed and all ready to go. You don't want to be scrambling on the first day. It's not the best look for you. And it's also, it can create some strain that you could have just prepared for in advance. So those are the 4 critical steps I would say for pre-onboarding: sending that welcome email, getting the workstation set up, having someone identified that the new hire can work closely alongside, especially for that first day or even first few days, and then preparing those new hire documents. Now, you've already prepared for the new hire. It's time for the orientation. So orientation is used to welcome the new employee to the organization structure, mission, vision, values. Sometimes people host this as a presentation. Sometimes people have a new hire packet that they provide. But there's a few key points that should be covered during the new hire orientation. You're going to want to make sure that you review and sign those HR policies. Something I run into all the time when I'm working with a new business. They have HR policies in place, but they're not having employees sign them consistently. And that can open your business up to risk down the line. So make sure if you have your HR policies that all of your new hires are reviewing them and signing them on the first day of employment or in the first few days. Next would be to collect new hire documents. This includes things like the W-4 and the I-9. And when you pair those new hire documents with the newly signed policies, you can start creating that employee file, which is definitely something that you're going to want to maintain from the moment that person starts their employment all the way through to post-employment, right? When the end of the relationship begins. So next one here, we've got employee training and setting expectations. Employee training is something that a lot of businesses provide to their new staff to make sure that people understand the roles and expectations that are required for employment. We have an entire section dedicated to training, so I won't cover that in too much detail right now. But setting expectations on that first day is really important. What I always recommend to small business owners is to take the job description they use to recruit that employee and review it with them on the first day. Sometimes it's nice to pair them with their direct manager to go over, these are the expectations for this specific role. I always recommend that you have your new hires sign the job description for the role that they're going to be performing. And this is going to be something that can really set you up for performance management down the line. Last one here are team introductions and a facility tour. I guarantee you this is probably going to be new hires' favorite thing to do, where they get to meet the people that they're going to be working with and they get to know the space that they're going to be in. This is something that you should probably rely on the new hire buddy for. They can take the new hire around, show them your place of business, introduce them so that they can start making connections and really feel welcomed with the rest of the team. Now, in terms of orientations, there's really 2 different ways you can deliver the orientation. The first is the in-person orientation. Now, if you're my age or older, you've already had an in-person orientation at some place of business. Here's what we know. In-person orientations generally look like a mountain of paperwork and it takes a few hours. It's pretty boring. Most people expect it at this point. But if you were to ask any new employee if they would prefer to spend hours filling out a stack of paperwork by hand and watching boring training videos on their first day of work, or spend a few minutes filling out one form electronically, and then spend the rest of the day meeting the team, getting dialed into the new job, taking a tour of the facility, I think we all know what they would choose. And that's why most businesses are shifting away from doing an in-person orientation in favor of the digital orientation. And this is where companies take advantage of technology to deliver some of those little bit more mundane aspects of orientation, the paperwork, the training videos. And this is going to offer a lot of increased flexibility for the new employee to ensure that all of your policies are signed and properly stored in the employee file. I highly recommend digitizing at least some part of your orientation, because when you use technology to deliver those policies and store them in the file, you're making it more likely that every single policy is signed by your staff. And again, this is going to add an additional layer of protection for your business if you were to ever find yourself in some type of litigation and wage dispute. You always want to have your documents ready to go with signed agreements. So that's the digital orientation. Again, I do recommend digitizing at least some part of your onboarding process. Now, the orientation is complete. Now we're into onboarding, and onboarding as a whole can be a few days up to a few months, depending on the budget and bandwidth of the organization. There's really no one right way to onboard new employees. It really is what makes sense for your business and what makes sense for the specific role that you're looking to onboard. So let's take a look at some of the 4 best practices associated with onboarding. The first is operational training. Again, we've mentioned training before. I'm going to be covering it in the next section. Training is a big part of onboarding so that the new hire understands the expectations of the role that they're expected to perform and how to find success in their role. Next one is two-way feedback. So when you're delivering an onboarding program, it's really important to get feedback from your new hire to understand how they're doing, understand if there's additional information you need to provide, understand if there's anything that might support their success that you can do. And this is going to set them up and make them feel seen and heard in the first few days. I guarantee you it's going to be so much better for the new hire, and it'll actually lead to higher levels of productivity down the line. The second thing there is making sure that you're able to provide feedback to the new employee, right? You're already hearing their feedback. You want to make sure you have some way of providing feedback to them in a consistent way that they learn to expect that feedback, so that if down the line you have some negative feedback to provide, you've already created a culture of communication between you and the new hire. So two-way feedback systems, really, really, really great, both in the context of onboarding and just in the context of managing people. Next one is cultural events. We already know that team introductions are probably the favorite part of the new hire experience. Find some way to introduce something that's not specifically work related into the onboarding process. Some companies like to do a team happy hour. You can also do a team lunch. If you go out and play a basketball game, find some way of really building that camaraderie between the new hire and the team that they're going to be joining. And that's going to set everyone up for success and make sure that people are quite comfortable with one another and able to perform well together. The last one is completion of onboarding. Something I've seen before too, working with small companies, is they have an onboarding program that just kind of fizzles out or doesn't have a designated ending point. And that's not great. You need to have a very specific timeline and what completion looks like, because you need to have some type of benchmark in place that can say, hey, this is where new hires should be at the end of onboarding. Because when you have someone coming through an onboarding program and their productivity is way past that and they're doing really well, that's a great thing to know. But it's also great to know if the new hire isn't meeting the performance expectations associated with the benchmark that you have in place. So make sure that you have an onboarding program with a specific ending point, because you can use that information down the line to make informed decisions about employment. I'm going to go ahead and move on here. I've got one more poll for you today. Now that we know a little bit about what's included in the onboarding process, I want to just ask, how would you rate the quality of your onboarding process? I'm going to drop this poll in here. And again, these results are private. I just want to hear from you now that we have a better understanding of what onboarding looks like. See some results coming in. Great. Okay, it's exactly what I expected. And it's basically true everywhere. We see a lot of people who would rate the quality of their onboarding as needs improvement, right? Onboarding is a process, right? And it's iterative, meaning you're constantly seeing what can change, what can be improved. We also see here, some people are somewhat good, and I see a few excellents. digital high five to all of you excellent onboarders. So this is just a quick window into how your onboarding process is doing so far. I know that by the end of the presentation, we'll have really great strategies for how you can measure performance of onboarding. So let's go ahead and jump right back into the presentation here. Let's look at effective employee training. We already know that training is a big part of the onboarding process. So in terms of categories of employee training, there's really two different ways you can provide training to new employees. I highly recommend using some combination of both of them. We'll be talking about both operational training and compliance training. Okay, so in terms of operational training, this refers to training that is provided to the new employee specific to how they perform the role that you've hired them for, right? And this can include things like how to use the technology you're providing to the new employee, operate equipment, how to interact with customers. So these are all of the things that are teaching the new employee, this is how we do your job here, okay? Building a robust operational training program is generally considered to be time-consuming and expensive, but it will ensure that the new employee feels prepared for the new role. They understand what success looks like, and they understand what they need to do to achieve success at your company. Small businesses, considering that this is a time-consuming and expensive process, can sometimes struggle with strong operational training programs. What I do recommend is having some type of material the learner can take home so that they can learn separately from the job, but take advantage of that new hire buddy and use some type of shadow or buddy system and pair them with an experienced employee. One thing I will say is that sometimes your highest performing team member isn't always a great trainer. So make sure that you're choosing someone that understands the rules and expectations of the role really well, and they can share that knowledge with the new hire in a way that the new hire can easily digest and take advantage of, okay? The next one I'm going to talk about here is compliance training. So compliance training is very different from operational training. Operational training is specific to the role. Compliance training is specific to the company, okay? So compliance training is really focused on training not just one employee, but all of your employees about what it looks like to be employed at your place of business. Now, compliance is something that in most cases is state or federally required. So just for example, California employers with more than 5 employees must provide sexual harassment training to their staff at least once every 2 years, and a certificate of completion must be stored in the employee file. There's a lot of states with sexual harassment training requirements, some states with workplace safety requirements. So these are compliance-based trainings. Now, depending on the nature of your business, you may also choose to provide other compliance-based trainings to reinforce company policies. So just to give you an example of that, if you're going to have a workplace violence policy at your company, I highly recommend that you use some type of workplace training. Policies are a lot like fine print, right? Nobody reads the fine print. So you have that signature, which can offer you some layer of protection, but you want to pair that policy with some type of training so that people understand the behaviors behind that policy, so that you can prevent those things from happening, right? You don't just want a sexual harassment policy in place. You want to ensure that people aren't sexually harassing other staff members at your place of employment. So policies go hand in hand with compliance-based trainings. As I always say, policies define the expectation and training reinforces the behavior. So that's compliance training. Some best practices I recommend for training is to utilize subject matter experts, right? People who know these topics really, really well. In the context of operational training, a subject matter expert might be a really experienced server that you use to train an incoming new server, right? They're going to show them how to wait tables, show them how to interact with customers, how to make sales. That could be your subject matter expert for a serving position. But in the context of compliance training, you're going to want to rely on a subject matter expert to deliver a workplace violence training or a sexual harassment training. And what this means is you probably don't want to be using an office admin to be delivering compliance-based trainings, which is why I would highly recommend either paying a professional to deliver your compliance trainings or purchasing compliant training modules that can deliver that training, and you don't have to be worried about any potential gaps in the training. The next one there is to document all completed training. I've said this once already. Documentation is risk mitigation, okay? You want to make sure that you leave a paper trail, especially when delivering training, both operational training and compliance training. What can happen, let's say you have an employee, you choose to end employment with the employee because they're not performing, that employee can come back and say, well, I wasn't trained. And if you're documenting the training and having them sign off saying that they completed your training program, you can add a layer of protection saying, no, you were in fact trained on this topic, right? So that's one way of protecting your business. The compliance training is another way of documenting, saying this employee went through workplace violence training. There's a certificate of completion to prove it. And these are just things to, prevent risk and safeguard your business against any potential future claims. So those are some best practices for employee training. I do want to take some time to talk about measuring success, right? If you're going to do anything in your business, you want to make sure that you have some way of knowing, is this successful? And if not, how can I improve it to make it successful? So there's a few ways of measuring success. There's key performance indicators and then using employee surveys. I'm going to go ahead and break those down. So key performance indicators, these are benchmarks for performance that you get to identify. So you can use knowledge or skill assessments during the training process to assess the learner's retention. Metrics of success, these are things that are specific to the role. Maybe you look at how many calls per day is considered high performance, number of sales. Make sure you clearly define those benchmarks of performance, because you can use them to start analyzing something called ramping time. Ramping time refers to the amount of time it takes for a new hire to perform at the same level of productivity as an employee who's been at your company for quite some time, right? And the goal of any training program is to start reducing ramping time. Let's say your current ramping time is 3 months. That's a long time for a new hire to become productive like your other employees. So if you can get that ramping time down to 1 month with a successful onboarding and training program, you're increasing productivity, especially in those first 3 months. Last one is learner satisfaction. And this is where you can take advantage of those employee surveys to say, hi, how are you doing with our training? What worked really well for you and what needed to be improved? Okay. So employee surveys can be delivered at several different points. You can do it at the end of a learning module, the end of the training day, the end of the training program, or after they've been fully ramped so that they can look back and say, hey, what information did I need during the onboarding process that I had to learn on the job? All right, so that's all I've got for you today. We do have some time for questions. Real quickly, I have some recommendations for you. Sign up with Bambi today. We have a lot of amazing onboarding tools you can take advantage of. This includes things like adding all of your staff to the platform, implementing policies. Remember I said to digitize your onboarding. This is how you're going to do that. You can track signatures to make sure all of your employees have signed, assign designated training modules for those compliance-based trainings, receive feedback throughout the onboarding process, and also get the help of a dedicated HR manager. Okay, so definitely rely on Bambi. We can help with your onboarding needs. You can contact us by visiting us online or calling us. Set, we've got some time for questions. What do we got for me?
We do. We have so many questions. Unfortunately, we will not be able to get to all of them, but let's squeeze in what we can. First question, I'm only hiring one employee. Do I need to build an onboarding program?
Great question. If you're hiring one employee, you're definitely going to need to do so many of the things included in the onboarding program. Make sure that they're signing HR policies, welcome them to the building, welcome them to the team. You're going to want to make sure that you train them in some way. A robust program might be something that you're going to want to build, because let's hope this isn't the last employee that you hire. So if you have the opportunity to start building a program, I would recommend starting with this first employee.
Great. Next question. If the expectations were not clearly set in the beginning, how do we go about setting them after the hiring?
This is a great question. I run into this all the time. If you don't have job descriptions in place, I recommend crafting job descriptions and then delivering them to all of your employees. I call it the Great Reset, where you interact with all of your employees. You have them sign the job descriptions that you've just created. So everyone's very clear and aware of what the expectations of employment are. And that creates that first benchmark that you can use performance management down the line to reference the job descriptions you've created.
Awesome. And let's squeeze in one more here. How and when are the HR managers available to answer questions? I've had some problematic employees and oftentimes I need a quick response.
Okay, great. So the way that it works here at Bambi, we do use technology to superpower our HR managers. What you can expect when you come to Bambi is that our HR managers will respond to any of your questions within at least 1 hour during regular business hours. And if you ever have a complex issue, let's say you're running into a new hire who needs specific accommodations during the onboarding process, you can schedule same and next day calls with the HR manager. We want to make sure that you get the support that you need when you need it most.
Awesome. And with that said, we are at time. Just a couple reminders on your way out. You will see an exit poll in Zoom. If you can please take a couple moments just to complete the survey. We will be having monthly webinars. So if you are a Bambi customer, you will hear from the Bambi team. And if you are not a Bambi customer, you can go to our LinkedIn page, our Instagram page, or our Facebook page, and you will see a schedule of webinars that will be coming out in the next week or so. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Dawn, thank you so much. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and we are truly lucky to have you here at Bambi. And I know our customers feel the same. Thank you all, and we hope to see you soon. Please contact me in the chat box if you'd like us to reach out to you shortly after. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.